Hey, thanks for joining us, everyone, and welcome to Let Go and Live Free, how to overcome emotional obstacles and live a positive, purpose-filled life. I'm your host, Lee Stein, and today we're joined by Anahita Parseghian to the summit. Welcome, Anahita.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here, Lee.
Thanks for joining us. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you, and then I'm going to pummel you with questions.
Sounds great.
Anahita is the founder of Brain Mastery, a certified pain and neuroplasticity coach and a certified TRE facilitator. After suffering from debilitating chronic pain for many years without any real diagnosis, she left her thriving career in the technology sector and committed herself to healing her own body. She was so inspired by the material she found on the mind-body connection and neuroplasticity that she completed multiple certifications on the subject and developed Brain Mastery to help others reprogram their brain and nervous system for a fulfilling, successful, stress-free, pain-free, and joyous life. Welcome to the summit, Anahita.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
That is a whole lot of healing, and it's very impressive. And I want to hear all about it, and I want you to share it with our viewers. But first, I must ask, what is neuroplasticity?
So neuroplasticity is, in the most simple term, is the ability of our brain to change itself. So until not too long ago, scientists believed that the brain cells do not change after a certain age. Say we develop our brains up until about 25, and it doesn't really shift after that and doesn't change after that. That couldn't be further away from the truth. Now we know that our brains are developing new connections, new neurons every single day, every moment of every day, and we're strengthening some of them, and we are weakening some of them by the virtue of the actions that we take, the diets that we hold, the thoughts that we entertain. And that opens us up to a whole world of possibility to be able to craft the kind of mindsets that we would like to have and to utilize these techniques to change the functions of the brain.
And that's why we've been able to develop terms like hacking your brain and rewiring your brain, because it really is possible to change that formulation that exists, which is a crazy, mind-blowing concept, really.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your journey and what happened that inspired you or motivated you to get to the heart of your own problem.
Mm-hmm. So my journey really began a long time ago. I would say about 5 years ago, when I first started noticing pain in my knees, and I never really had any pain. I was healthy. I had a good diet. I was working out. Things seemed to be really going very well. And so that was surprising. I thought that I had injured myself and went to many doctors trying to get a diagnosis. They couldn't really find anything in my MRIs and my tests and x-rays. And the pain starts spreading. So it starts spreading to my other knee, then my hips. My lower back was especially impacted for the entire period of time. And then my elbows, my wrists, knuckles. So there was a period of time that almost every joint in my body was deeply painful, yet doctors could not really diagnose it. And as a result, I'm a curious person, so I needed to get to the bottom of it because I felt that all the treatments that were available to me were symptom treatments, and they weren't really getting to the root of the cause. And being someone in their 30s, that is really scary to have to take this very serious medications, things like antidepressants or opioid painkillers, to be able to function as a normal person. So I felt that I couldn't understand why I was being diagnosed with medications, and that the doctors didn't really seem to know the answers. And they had every good intention, they just couldn't diagnose me, they couldn't figure it out. And I was lucky enough to stumble upon mind-body medicine. And when I did, I started learning a whole lot about the psychosomatic nature of not only chronic pain, but many different chronic illnesses. And I just knew that stress was a very strong factor, even though I didn't consider myself a particularly stressed out person. It was your meditation. Actually, it was revealed to me that my work stress had a whole lot to do with the pain in my body. So I had to give it a shot and take a little break and see what I could learn. And once I got into the material, I couldn't stop.
So it's interesting that you note that you didn't consider yourself to be a highly stressed person, because maybe you weren't, but I know that in my case, I think I was, but I just developed such a high tolerance for it because that's how we're raised. That's how we live. You got to work yourself into the ground to get promoted, to make the money, to do all the things that you think you're supposed to achieve. And we're just operating at this very tight, you can break at any minute kind of pace. We don't even know what's happening to us.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We have built a very strong tolerance for stress and stress symptoms. We just have considered them as a normal part of life and accepted that this is just part of being alive and being an adult and being human. But that couldn't be further away from the truth. You know, we put tremendous amount of pressure on ourselves to perform and to do well and to succeed. And just the amount of pressure that we put on ourselves, even if we don't have a particularly stressful work environment, just the pressures that we put upon ourselves can be enough to really impact
slowly kind of eating us away from the inside out.
Indeed.
So from a physiological standpoint, what did you discover about the way in which stress affects both our minds and our bodies? What is the connection?
Mm-hmm. So when stress happens, our body goes through, essentially how it happens is that we receive some kind of data, our brain receives some kind of data, and this data causes the brain to say, oh, this is either too much, or I don't know how to categorize it, or it's overwhelming in some way, or it's triggering a past memory. And as a result, the emotional brain goes into high alert, or amygdala becomes activated. So the emotional brain goes into high alert. Once the amygdala is activated, then it sets in motion the release of stress hormone, the cortisol. Once the stress hormone is released, our body has a certain set of physiological functions that are set in motion, which we know more commonly as the fight and flight response. So the fight and flight response, when that becomes activated, our heart starts pounding really fast, our breathing becomes faster and shallower, blood is redirected from certain functions that aren't critical for survival, like our immune functions, our libido, our digestive functions, into our limbs in preparation for fight and flight. So this is a really complex system that's been developed to help us survive a threat, a physical threat often. And it's taken thousands of years for this system to be developed. And there are many other physiological functions that go into play, but I'm just kind of giving you the most important pieces of it. And essentially, they're designed through thousands of years. And now that we're in our modern era, our life has developed and technology has developed in such a fast pace that human evolution cannot catch up as quickly. So hopefully in another 1,000, 2,000 years, we might have much more efficient systems to deal with stress, but currently we don't, because our current sources of stress aren't threats from a predator animal chasing us or opposing tribes with their spears chasing us down. It's more about our mind, and most of our stress comes from our mind, comes from our relationships, comes from our finances. It's how we process information. Our brain, however, isn't equipped to differentiate between a physical threat and a perceived threat, or an emotional imbalance, or an emotional discomfort. It sets in motion the exact same functions and exact same physiological responses that as if we were being attacked by a lion. So what happens when we have these energy built up, we have to use it. The fight and flight response needs to get utilized. And if it doesn't get utilized, we really get in trouble, which is where I firmly believe a lot of these illnesses are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So are you saying that so fight, flight, or freeze, right? If we don't run, then because we're not being chased by a tiger who wants to eat us, right? We're really just being chased by our mindset, right? I need to do better. I need to be there on time. I need to communicate in a certain way. If we don't do what they used to do thousands of years ago, what exactly is happening that's tripping us up?
Mm-hmm. So what happens is that the energy is built up. So we have all this energy, and now all of the functions of certain organs have been deprioritized. When you're being chased down by a lion, your libido is not important. Your digestion, not important. Your immune function is not important. Your survival is important. So these things become continuously deprioritized. And what happens is that over the course of time, if we continuously move through fight and flight and we don't use that energy that gets built up, that energy actually gets stored in our bodies. We will often notice a form of tension in the shoulders and neck or the lower back. This is the most common way people will associate a physical symptom with stress. But also, as continuously our immune functions are deprioritized because we're moving through fight and flight response continuously, what happens is that we get sick much more often. So after a particularly stressful episode in a week, we'll notice that we might get sick much more easily, or we develop IBS. So that's definitely one of the conditions that's directly linked to having a lot of stress, because continuously the digestive system is deprioritized. We develop heart problems. So what we know is that the top 5 killer diseases in the United States, the strongest contributor to that is stress. So stress is something that we need to talk about much more often, but we're not. And I believe that we don't talk about it because we just think that there is not much we can do about it. So I would like to bring that more into discussion and awareness that there are things we can do about it to mediate the impact of stress.
That, and we're not even aware that we're experiencing it because it's just become the norm for us. So I think part of it, right, is taking a step back and in those moments of quiet or creating moments of quiet to kind of evaluate ourselves, right? Where are we? How are we feeling right now? How did I feel yesterday? And finding that happy place, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. I believe that we should be proactive when it comes to stress reduction, just like we are with workout and nutrition. We don't wait until we're sick to go to the gym and work out. We don't wait until we're sick to change our diet. I mean, some people do, but if we really want to live a healthy and long and fulfilling life, we take those active steps in advance. So people talk about diet and exercise a lot, and it's prioritized a lot, talked about a lot. We don't talk about stress reduction techniques as much. I believe that we all need a regimen on a daily basis to reduce our level of stress.
So let's talk about that. I understand that there are several ways that we can work on recovering and reducing our stress. Can you walk us through those?
Yes, definitely. There are many ways we can do that. So there's definitely a mind, body, spirit approach that I take with this. On the mind front, mindfulness around our thoughts and our patterns is really helpful. So when we start noticing certain patterns and we know that they're going to stress us out, we know that these patterns aren't serving us, we have to start looking at those patterns, understanding the root, and making efforts to change them, to shift them. And that shifting doesn't happen by force. It really happens by patience and awareness. So that's why I'm a big fan of mindfulness practice, which is all about bringing awareness to your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations.
Can you give us an example of a mindfulness practice?
Mindfulness practice is actually really simple. When we talk about mindfulness, a lot of people think about meditation, but it's not always a meditation. Mindfulness is simply awareness. If I have awareness around my thoughts and I notice a thought, instead of getting activated by it, what I recommend my clients do is bring in their curiosity and start looking at it with curiosity. Because as soon as we start looking at a thought that is otherwise really activating emotionally, with curiosity, we actually turn on a different part of the brain that calms the emotional response. And with curiosity, we discover more, we understand more, we retain more of the information we receive. So there's beautiful, complex physiology in the brain when it comes to curiosity. So mindfulness sometimes is about bringing awareness to your thoughts and just noticing, oh, wow, I wonder why I think this thought, and not immediately jumping into conclusion of this is valid, this is the truth, I am right, they are wrong. So these are areas of conflict in our thoughts that we can address. Or emotions, if you notice that we find, for example, an attachment of how somebody else responds to us continuously, how we're seen, how we're received. We want to become curious and start looking at that, because often we will find that there are old emotional patterns that really belong in childhood that don't really have a room, and it actually stresses us further, you know, in our adulthood. So we find those thought patterns and we actively work on changing those thought patterns through neural reprogramming techniques.
Okay, so mindfulness is number one.
Definitely. So that's one of them. It's definitely number one on the mind front. On the body front, I work with a couple things. So one of the ways to reduce stress in the body is obviously to have a solid workout regimen. Not just a regular workout regimen, a measured and intentional workout regimen that's designed to bring the heart level up to a certain point 5 times a week. And then there is plenty of science that shows how that starts changing the stress response, because workout is just like a vaccine. So when you go get a vaccine, you receive a mild version of a pathogen that then sets in motion certain kind of immune response in the body, and you develop the antibodies in your body to not contract the illness down the road, or when you get exposed to the stronger pathogen, you already have these antibodies. And it's the same way with workout. When we go and work out, we release mild amounts of cortisol hormone, which is the stress hormone in our body. And if we continuously expose ourselves to mild amounts of stress hormone, we find that when we are exposed to stress, our response is much more measured, much more effective. So that's another one on the body front. But I work with somatic therapy techniques quite a bit, which are again designed to release that additional energy that is stored in the body from the fight and flight response through activating our neurogenic tremors. So,
what does all of that mean, Anahita?
So there are 2 types of therapy. There is psychotherapy, which is a top-down approach that we take. Psychotherapy talks about, you know, the thoughts. We go and talk about our thoughts and our memories and our emotion as a way of processing, you know, the past and the hold of these emotions and these memories on our psyche. So we consider that a top-down. And we hope that through a top-down approach, any body tension that's associated with these thoughts and these stress levels in our life is going to dissolve itself. But there's also somatic therapy techniques, which are not as known as psychotherapy techniques, obviously, but somatic therapy techniques are a bottom-up approach. So we try to address the body and bring harmony and balance and peace to the cellular level of the body as a way of mediating the impact of the thoughts. And our body holds so much wisdom. Our body knows so much more than our brain does. Our brain actually has to filter a lot of the information, whereas our body, especially, we have a second brain, we call the gut brain, which is the highest concentration of neurons outside of our brain, our actual brain. So in this brain, in the gut brain, we actually receive more information. And because the gut brain's job is not to analyze and filter and make sense of the world, we have access to more of the information. We know that to be, we call it intuition. So we know that to be our intuition. And so somatic therapy works a whole lot with the body and the body wisdom. And there are a few techniques. They're all designed to tap into where in the body are we holding on to an emotion, a memory, a tension, or stress. So we work on 3 layers of tension, stress, and trauma. That's how we look at somatic therapy. Many techniques out there, most of them are designed to activate certain kind of spontaneous movement in the body as a way of releasing the impact of the memory or the stress or tension that's held in the muscles or the cellular memory of the body. When it comes to TRE, that work is done by activating neurogenic tremors. So neurogenic tremors are tremors that happen in the body that are involuntary. They come from our central nervous system, and they're designed to release tension. All mammals have this mechanism. Children, human children have the mechanism. Adults, however, the theory says that the human adults have turned off the tremors consciously because we associate them to be a sign of illness or sign of weakness. So a lot of the TRE practice that I teach is around bringing that memory back to the nervous system and teaching the nervous system that it has this mechanism to use. So people might have experienced this perhaps after a car accident. You'll step out of the car and you'll check, I'm fine, maybe exchange some information with the other party, and everything's done, and you sit in your car and you want to drive, and all of a sudden your entire body is shaking and tremoring.
Yeah.
The episode has passed. So you're not afraid of the episode. It's not a response, immediate response to the fear of the episode, but it's rather that additional energy that needs to get discharged from the body. So sometimes that system kicks in when the tension and the energy is so big and you absolutely have no control over it. Other times, we've gotten really good at turning them off. So most of the times we don't experience this. But if you've ever observed a pet, you'll notice that your pets shake, and they're not just shaking. It's completely involuntary. They shake as a way of releasing tension from something that happened maybe 5-10 minutes earlier. As soon as their environment feels safe enough, the nervous system will kick this mechanism into effect to release that tension. So a lot of the practice on the somatic therapy is built around that, around turning on the system so that we can release that tension from the body.
Is there an exercise, a short one, an easy one that you could share with the viewers just for sort of immediate stress relief, if there is such a thing?
Definitely. Not on the somatic therapy front, because that's a very specific thing. There are long sessions. They take about 1.5 to 2 hours to turn on the tremors. It's also not safe for people to try to do it at home on their own for the first time.
Don't try this at home.
Yeah. But I can definitely share a technique that is very effective in calming the nervous system.
Great.
So what we know is we have a limbic brain, which is our emotional brain. It's a more primitive brain than our prefrontal cortex, which is the advanced human brain, is the logical brain. So the limbic brain has a very fast processing speed because it only processes emotions. And its job is to maintain our survival, ensure our survival. They will hold on to negative thoughts and negative memories as a reference point to always alert you to your survival. Yeah. And so it kicks in motion first because it's faster. Then we have our logical brain, our prefrontal cortex, which has a lower processing speed. It processes a lot more information and it does analysis. So whereas limbic brain is almost like a knee-jerk reaction, prefrontal cortex does analysis, looks at past, looks at other subjective data that it receives, and then makes the best guess, and it's always a guess, makes best guess of what we're experiencing. So what happens is that when we become triggered, it's always the emotions that kick in first because they're faster and it's a knee-jerk reaction. So emotions kick in first, and people probably have experienced this, and maybe something happens, someone says something, and we have a response, a really intense emotional response, and 5 minutes later, we regret it. Why? Because the prefrontal cortex gets the opportunity to reprocess that information and then make a more logical, not emotional decision that I could have probably handled that better. So part of the job, part of this technique that I'm teaching, I'm sharing this so that I'm a firm believer in understanding the science is the best way for people to really utilize the techniques. Otherwise, everyone has ideas. So let's focus on the science. So the part of the brain, limbic brain, which is the alarm system, is the amygdala, which I mentioned earlier. And the amygdala, as soon as it gets activated, all our fight and flight and stress responses become activated. And the amygdala is, I call it our troublemaker organ. The amygdala is very difficult to regulate. So there's literally no other part of the limbic brain that can regulate the amygdala. So you can't use your emotions to regulate your emotions. You're going to have to turn on your logic to regulate your emotions.
Okay.
But it's not even accessible at that time because we're in emotional response. So how do I turn on my logic? So thoughts aren't as helpful. When somebody's angry, you can't talk sense into them in that moment, right? Thoughts aren't helpful. People actually will lash out even more. So how do we hack the system? How do we make the prefrontal cortex active? So there's a part of the prefrontal cortex called the medial prefrontal cortex, and it houses the cingulate cortex. Our cingulate cortex is the single only part of the brain that can regulate the amygdala. And luckily, we can manually activate it with our intention. So the cingulate cortex receives information from our senses, our different senses. And so by activating our senses intentionally, we can activate that part of the brain, which as soon as it's active, our amygdala becomes regulated, calms down. And the most simple way I can share this is rubbing your fingers, or my more favorite one is actually rubbing your earlobes, because it gives you a few different sensations. It gives you sound, and it also gives you the feeling of the fingers and the lobe touching each other. There's also temperature sensors. And putting your attention, your awareness for 10 to 20 seconds fully on this action, nothing else. And we'll notice that in the height of emotions, the height of stress, if we just take a pause for 10 to 20 seconds and rub our fingers or rub our earlobe and just attentively pay attention to the sounds and the feelings and the texture and the temperature that we're experiencing, that works to activate our cingulate cortex. And as a result, it calms the amygdala, and we actually will notice a big difference.
Wow, that is fascinating and super easy as well. And as you're doing it, this image came into my head of babies who, when they're sucking their thumbs or drinking a bottle, are often doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what that's about.
Mm-hmm.
Are they de-stressing themselves?
Definitely a self-soothing mechanism. So all of that is a self-soothing mechanism for babies. Animals do it. They do it subconsciously. Again,
Well, they weren't taught to do that. They're just doing it.
Exactly.
So interesting.
Yeah. And that's the same reason why, giving someone a hug and caressing them helps them feel better.
Yes.
Because again, that touch element turns on certain parts of the brain that are designed to calm the system.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Any other tools or tips or techniques you want to share with us?
Let's see. I mean, if I was going to share one of the most impactful things is curiosity. I always say curiosity is the most underappreciated tool for spiritual development.
Mm-hmm.
Because curiosity turns on so many different parts of our brain. It's not just one part. It activates all these different parts of the brain. You can't be curious and angry at the same time. It's just not possible. So you could always, when you turn on curiosity, opportunity opens up. So I teach this to my clients on a regular basis, the power of curiosity. Because, I do a lot of work in performance coaching, which is again about reprogramming the brain and our responses. And when it comes to curiosity, it not only de-escalates the emotions, but it also turns on, it activates the hippocampus in a very big way. And what happens is that when our hippocampus is activated, we have more focus and we learn easier because we have more focus. But not only we learn easier, we actually retain that information better because curiosity is directly connected to the production of serotonin in our brain. So every time we become curious, serotonin is released in the brain. And because the brain has this concept of neuroplasticity, whatever it likes more of, it will create more of. So when the brain says that we seek pleasure, the brain says that we have serotonin as a result of curiosity, the brain will say, oh, well, I want to do more curiosity because it equates it with pleasure. So we'll do more of that. And because we do more of it, what happens is that we retain the data, the information better, because we associate that to be a pleasant experience. So which to me is fascinating. And not only that, it also works on calming the amygdala by removing the fear of novelty. Because our brains have so much fear of what it doesn't know. And if we turn on curiosity and the brain equates that as a pleasurable experience, then the fear of novelty actually starts disappearing. And we become more courageous as a result, more bold as a result, and less stressed indeed.
I love that. It makes complete sense too, because knowledge is power, right? And if we are in stress, if we are in overwhelm, and we can take a step back, and instead of just letting all those emotions wash over us and create a frenzy where we can't think straight, like you said before, you can't reason with somebody who's in this heightened state of anger or stress, we can ask ourselves, where is this coming from? Let me think about it. And just the process of having to quiet your mind enough to think through what happened 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes before this happened calms you down physically and mentally, allows you to think straight, and sort of quiets the emotions that are causing the stress. And if you can even continue along that path, take it one step further. Ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario here? What's going to happen, right? Am I going to get struck by a bus? Am I going to die? Asking yourself out of curiosity what the next step is can also create a certain calmness when you realize that our fight or flight response is kind of taking over, and we can rein that in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think always first step is like, let's calm the nervous system with some kind of a somatic, sensory practice. And then let's activate our curiosity, and the magic unfolds. And I think we can all agree that in our modern world, especially these days, we can use a little more curiosity in relating to one another. Because the more we come from a place of anger and stress and judgment and emotions, and allow our emotions to take over, we'll never find common ground. So curiosity will help us develop that peaceful relationships, the common ground with others, and also with ourselves, with our own emotions.
Absolutely. Well said. I love that you said that. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us and sharing all this wonderful scientific neuroplasticity, stress relieving information. It's been so valuable, and thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you all appreciate all that information, because I know I do. So
thank you.
I hope we can have you on again sometime in the future.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks, Anahita. Everybody, we'll see you tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed today's interview. We'll see you on the other side for the next interview, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.